Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Friends and colleagues, I'm honored to be inaugurated as Swarthmore's 14th president in this garden paradise and at a college which some have called the most scholarly institution in America. Walt Whitman, friend to many of this college's founders and great poet of American democracy, once said, "Gratitude has never been made half enough of by the moralist. It is indispensable to a complete character. The disposition to be appreciative, thankful. I should say the quality of gratitude rounds the whole emotional nature." I want to express my deep gratitude to Barbara Mather and the Board of Managers who have entrusted to me the stewarding of this community, to the faculty who have so warmly welcomed and vigorously engaged me, to the students who have supported me and, yes, challenged me, and to the staff who have generously offered friendship and colleagueship. I am grateful for the presidents from Edward Parrish to Al Bloom who have led this community before me, and I want to take just a moment and recognize two of Swarthmore's past presidents, David Fraser and Dory Friend, who are with us here this day. David and Dory, please stand. Gratitude, according to Whitman, adds vitality to life, and I'm blessed with many who make my life vital. Fred, my husband, and members of our family, Nate and Lisa, Kathy and Bob, Tom and Colleen, Catherine, Gail, Pat and Peggy, and Polly. I also want to thank my friends who have traveled here, and I note with special appreciation those among them from Colgate, Emory, and Yale who've come to celebrate this day with us. Many people have worked hard, very hard, to make this gathering a time of celebration as well as intellectual engagement. Maurice Eldridge chaired a hard-working committee. Sharon Friedler choreographed a wonderful arts event. Along with special thanks to those who have spoken during this service, I also want to thank our panelists and their moderators, Professor Robin Wagner Pacifici, Christopher Edley, Andrew Perrin, William Salatan, Professor Carr Everbach, Ann Kapuscinski, Christopher Laszlo, and Matthew St. Clair. I want to thank Professor John Alston and his ensemble who's providing us that wonderful and inspirational music this afternoon. But I also want to ask you to join me in a round of applause to thank our Swarthmore colleagues who set up the chairs, who prepared that great lunch, who crafted the communications, who managed the list, the robes, and all the other countless details. For 146 years, Swarthmore College has educated citizens and leaders to contribute to the common good, to lead in their professions, to enjoy an intellectual life, to support the arts and culture, and to engage in athletics and wellness. Across the decades, Swarthmore College has always existed as a forward-looking community, thinking imaginatively how best to prepare Swarthmoreans for the future. It has done so, as has been noted, from its inception by including women as students, professors, and managers, even at a time when they couldn't even hold property in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The college continued its commitment to innovation through the establishment of an engineering department in the early 1870s and the creation of its signature honors program in 1922. And it has always maintained a profound commitment to social responsibility, most recently supported by the Eugene M. Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility, which was founded in 2001. Swarthmore has also been willing to pause and reassess when it has fallen short of its own traditions of innovation and imagination. After decades of not accepting African Americans as students, Swarthmore demonstrated its full embrace of diversity and multiculturalism under the leadership of Presidents Friend, Fraser, and Bloom. Although we have sometimes failed, as all human institutions do, at our best, we've shaped our future by looking critically and courageously at the needs of our students and the needs of the world. During this year, I've met thousands of alumni, parents, students, friends, and faculty who share a deep sense of belonging to this community. As I've heard their stories, perspectives, and hopes, I have been struck by how aptly one of my very favorite passages from the work of Hannah Arendt captures the essential nature of this college. Arendt says, basically, we are always educating for a world that is or is becoming out of joint. For this is the basic human situation in which the world is created by mortal hands to serve mortals for a limited time as home. Because the world is made by mortals, it wears out. And because it continuously changes its inhabitants, it runs the risk of becoming as mortal as they. To preserve the world against the mortality of its creators and inhabitants, it must be constantly set anew. The problem is to educate in such a way that a setting right remains actually possible. As I formally assume the presidency of Swarthmore, I believe we must, as has been the tradition throughout our history, continue to educate in a way that a setting right remains possible. We have to now ask ourselves, how must the world be set anew? How must the world be set aright? We must educate to set anew and to set aright our relationship to the earth, to our climate, to the web of all existence. Under this canopy of trees, with the rush of this wonderful wind, can there be any doubt that we must do all we can to sustain the beauty of this good earth? Together in this collection, can there be any question that we must care for one another, and equally important for those who live without our resources? We must teach those who can innovate and set anew a world whose population will grow from 6.7 billion to 9.2 billion by the year 2050, the year in which many of this year's graduating class will retire. We must help our students and our alumni lead in setting anew and setting aright issues ranging from pandemic diseases to climate-driven migration to the extinction of species. We must educate to set anew and aright our common life, a life that has outgrown 19th and 20th century models of the common good. As we heard today, government institutions are fractured. The foundation of our civic frame appears cracked. The gap between the rich and the poor in the United States and around the world is accelerating. Public educational systems in this country are now ranked 11th to 19th in the world, depending upon which ranking system one consults. Racism continues to be the tremulous fault line in our American experiment. Violence and prejudice continue to stain the lives of our children, the defenseless, and too many others across our culture and around the world. But while our common life seems crippled by dysfunction and confusion, America, as our alumnus Robert Zoellick notes, has a trump card. It's openness. Can we use that openness to create a new 21st century commons? We must educate to set aright civic discourse. In recent months, we have witnessed just how uncivil that discourse can become in both national and local areas. How demeaning and cruel words can be, whether uttered in Congress, cyberspace, town halls, or on playgrounds. Television shows, blogs, and chat rooms too often encourage groupthink, or what I heard today, be an echo chamber, and uncivil discourse. Too many individuals want to cozy up with the like-minded inside some affinity group, wanting to wrap themselves in a cocoon of opaque information packaged to block out other perspectives. It is far too easy to hurl hateful words in a mob or anonymously on the web. We must educate people to listen to others whose views differ from their own, to deliberate and to collaborate, to embrace complexity, to seek consensus. Education to set anew and set aright must now be global in scope, aimed at creating world citizens, or what the Stoics called cosmopolitai. It is no longer sufficient to set aright and set anew only on a local or national scale. We must learn to live together. We must learn to talk across the boundaries and barriers of difference. We need Swarthmorean world citizens who hear the cries of those whose rights are trampled, who have the discipline to build new common good, and who have the capacity to innovate. We educate to set anew and set aright in the midst of clamor, the clamor of the voices of the people of the world, the clamor of diversity, the clamor of different opinions, beliefs, needs, and opportunities, the clamor of 24/7 information, the clamor of the ever-increasingly distressed birds, fish, and mammals of the ravaged earth, of the polluted water of the air itself. Clamor engulfs us as both noise and demand. Swarthmore College is blessed by its deeply rooted commitment to educate, to set anew and set aright. We have at our command the intelligence and the imagination, when guided by our values, will enable us to uncover and respond to the demands expressed in the midst of that clamor. 3 signature educational practices run through Swarthmore's history and serve as a vibrant source of our ability to reset and renew. These are, first, rigorous intellectual analysis. Our long tradition of challenging our students and ourselves to think deeply, critically, creatively. Second is the cultivation of Quaker values, such as equality, community, simple living, generous giving, speaking truth to power, and consensus decision-making. Third, educating for civic and social responsibility for the world, a value so powerfully expressed in the lives of the abolitionists and suffragettes who founded this school, and by the many alumni whose lives speak in a uniquely Swarthmorean way through the combined strength of their intelligence, moral values, and sense of social responsibility. These three practices constitute the heart of our beloved community, of our alumni, students, parents, faculty, and staff. There is no college anywhere better prepared to educate for setting anew and setting aright than is Swarthmore. To continue to educate for the world that lies ahead, our signature practices must evolve, as they have in the past. Next year, we will start planning for our future in a formal way, listening and speaking while learning about the emerging trends in higher education. We will study our academic programs. We will take stock of fitness of our finance and facilities. We will consider new areas of new technology and new activities for our students. We will review the state of our programs. We will analyze the data we gather, and we will reflect upon our values. We will reason together and dream imaginatively as we think about our future. Doing so will require a great deal of hard work, but it will offer us an opportunity to engage in a collaborative process of discovery. We will do what we do best and what we love doing best: analyze the facts rigorously, debate robustly the meaning and implication of our values, deliberate carefully and thoroughly. We will extend the legacy of this special community by asking, what do our students need to learn and become for the world ahead? But for now, let us pause and ask ourselves, what in the context of the present do we already find in our midst that gives us hope, that will guide us as we educate for the future? Our willingness to explore the transformation of knowledge and learning is a hopeful sign. If the 20th century witnessed the end of the industrial age, the 21st century may be called the knowledge age, as we now live in a post-industrial, knowledge-based global economy. Knowledge expands, driven by its own internal movements, as disciplines identify new areas and new conversation partners. Knowledge and learning are framed now as sometimes collaborative and participatory, and sometimes individual and abstract. Technology has forever changed cognition, learning, and knowledge itself. Computational science allows us theoretical reflection, problem solving, and modeling in unforeseen ways. Many students in the digital generation may well prefer a plug-and-play learning style in which experimentation and participation become the entry point for sequential learning. Multiculturalism and globalization expand our ways of knowing, our patterns of learning, and the scope of what there is to know. The lifelong pursuit of knowledge may, in effect, make the 21st century the age of a new global culture of perpetual learning. If we are to set anew and set aright, we must find a way to use the new tools of knowledge together with our older tools of learning. But we must use these new tools and approaches wisely, responsibly, and critically. We have much to worry about in this new age of knowledge. I am concerned that the digital environment tempts us to abandon the requirements of civil discourse and militates against taking the time and doing the hard work to develop face-to-face communities. I worry about creating standards of excellence in the new forms of knowledge. President Frank Adelot created the honors program at Swarthmore not to brand the school, but to protect America from mediocre education. Our challenge in this new age will be to continue our distinctive role as standard bearer for excellence in liberal arts education. Another source of great hope for us as we address the challenges of the future is our potential to cultivate the imaginations of our students so that they may set the world aright and anew. The hope for the future depends upon our reimagining our traditional approaches and creating new solutions to the problems of the day. Richer, fuller imaginations in the sciences, social sciences, humanities, and the arts will be required of our graduates. To address the urgency of living sustainably, we need new scientific discoveries and new engineering designs. In order to reimagine our common life together as citizens, we need what Andrew Perrin calls the democratic imagination. In this country and around the world, we must, as Chris Laszlo suggested, create sustainable value by combining business sustainability with environmental sustainability and have our graduates lead those firms. Social entrepreneurship, so at home in the Lang Center, can transform the way intractable problems are addressed on a global level and can do so in a sustainable fashion. I also want to underscore the critical necessity to cultivate the narrative imagination, the ability to follow a story, to understand carefully what characters are feeling and doing in ways different than what the reader might feel and do, to learn new ways of living together and to become truly world citizens. We need to ensure that our students become experts at the narrative imagination. We must feed all our imaginations with dance, poetry, music, theater, and the visual arts. We must build the cultural and intellectual capacity of our communities through the arts. We must nourish and enjoy the arts to enrich cross-cultural understanding and to help us build common ground not only on our campus, but also around the world. Across all our disciplines and programs, in our practices and activities, we will need to focus on both the critical and the creative. We will need to be careful not to rush, to be creative, without also being critical. Since education is, by definition, meant to lead us out of the shadows of ignorance, wrong belief, and prejudice, so that when we enter the light, we are able to see new possibilities. Innovation itself requires a critical stance, because more often than not, it's through our use of what might be termed the analogical imagination, in which known insights and techniques get applied to new problems in new ways. In addition to Lucretia Mott, one of my favorite women in our history is a 19th century professor named Susan Cunningham. She liked to tell her students, when encouraging them to think or tackle a tough problem, use thy gumption. Today, when we say use thy gumption to our students, we mean it both critically and creatively. Another area from which we can draw hope is the tradition of our life together as a community. The Swarthmore community, as I have come to know it, is one that continues to this day to reflect this really distinctly Quaker blend of fostering individuals who search their consciousness, but who also live together, listening and speaking, seeking to arrive at consensus. Researchers in education tell us that there are two critical aspects of liberal arts education that create the environment for the excellence for which they are well known. The first is, of course, the engagement, the close engagement of faculty and students. The second is the nature of the residential community. This community provides a context for learning to listen, to speak, and to live together in an intimate setting with those from whom we are different. Of all the forms of democracy, of all the forms of education in our democracy, residential liberal arts communities most clearly express the link between education and preparation for citizenship that goes back to the founding of this country. Liberal arts colleges have taken seriously the responsibility to educate citizens for democracy by teaching critical thinking and thoughtful deliberation. They also cultivate in students an appreciation of the full range of ideas and values that support a democracy, and then provide for them the opportunity to experience and test these values on a daily basis, side by side with their peers, their neighbors, their faculty. To educate for such citizenship, we must continue to make sure that everyone has access economically and culturally to that education, to our education. W.E.B. Du Bois rightly said, "Of all the civil rights for which the world has struggled and fought for 5,000 years, the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental." The challenge as we continue access, continue to engage faculty and students, continue to cultivate the residential community. The challenge is to learn new ways of living that cross over long-standing fault lines of communication and that bridge into communities closed off by political beliefs, racial lines, religious beliefs, or class differences. We must move beyond being satisfied with statistical diversity. We must realize that our work is not finished just because we host many cultures on this campus, and that our student body is economically diverse. Now the real work, filled with challenge and opportunity, begins. And our own community of diversity and deliberation must be one that builds bridges in a global context, fostering conversation that, as Anthony Appiah says, can be delightful or just vexing, mainly inevitable. What models of the common good can we build in which both what we hold in common and our diversity be upheld? Hope in the Age of Clamor is the title of this address, and with the weight of those words, we shall conclude this gathering. Swarthmore is and always has been a radical act of hope in the clamor of the world. The founders, members of a small group called Hicksite Quakers, practiced radical hope by establishing this college in consonance with their work as abolitionists, suffragettes, and peace activists. Time and time again throughout our history, we have minded our light, and we've tried to be both the conscious and the leader of American liberal arts education. Most importantly, we have transformed the lives of our students, educating them to be leaders and even laureates of their professions, but also shaping them to live responsibly, both in their individual lives and for the world around them. Swarthmore has never been and shall never be an ivory tower, a cloister, or just an ordinary college. In this clamor, Swarthmore is and shall be a radical act of hope to educate in a way that makes possible the setting aright and setting anew of this world.